Chapter 3: From Gathering to Growing Food. For humans, most of our food, like fruits, vegetables, grain, milk, meat, we all obtain them from plants which are grown and animals which we rear. We know that across the world there are different climatic conditions, different soil conditions. Therefore, different plants grow in different conditions. This is why these farmers keep in mind these different conditions and grow crops in some areas and not in others. Similarly, different animals are more suited towards different environments. For example, sheep and goats survive more easily than cattle in dry, hilly environments. How did farming begin? In ancient times, people observed the places where edible plants were found, how the seeds broke off the stalks, fell on the ground, and how new plants were born. They also started looking after these plants, protecting them from birds so that these plants could ripen and their seeds could grow. In this way, people became farmers. They also came to realize that they could tame animals by methods like leaving food for them near the shelters. The first animal to be tamed was the wild ancestor of the dog. After a while, people encouraged animals which were relatively gentle to come and live with them. These animals, like sheep, goat, cattle, and other domestic animals, they lived in herds, and most of them ate grass. People protected these animals from attacks from other wilder animals, and this is how they became herders. Here we can see pictures of their settlements and how we assume early farming and herding to be conducted. What is domestication? Domestication is the process in which the people grow plants and look after animals. Very often the plants and animals which are grown by people are very different from wild plants and animals like those grown in the forest. This is because we humans select the specific plants and animals which we domesticate, which are not prone to disease. They have a large size grain, strong stalks, and the stalks are also very capable of bearing the weight of the ripe grain. Seeds from selected plants are preserved and sown so that we can ensure that the new plants or the new yield will have the same good qualities. Among animals, the more gentle animals are selected for breeding. As a result, these animals and plants are very different from wild animals and plants. One example in which we can see the difference between these wild animals and the domesticated animals are like the teeth and the horns of wild animals are usually much larger. This is because they are mainly carnivorous while the domesticated animals are mainly herbivorous. The process of domestication was a very gradual process that takes place in many parts of the world. It began almost 12,000 years ago. All the plant and animal produce that we use today is a result of domestication. We usually started domestication with plants like wheat and barley and animals like sheep and goat. Here we can see the approximate time frame of domestication based on archaeology, that is the study of fossils. First, we started with the wild ancestor of the dog, and slowly we have evolved to the present-day ducks. As the people began growing plants, it meant that they had to stay in the same time to look after the plants and taking care of them. The grain had to be used carefully and stored. People had to think ways of storing it. Thus, they began making large pots or baskets or pits into the ground to store this grain safely. Animals multiply naturally. If they are looked after carefully, they provide milk, which is an important source of food, and meat whenever required. Animals that are reared are used as a store of food. Here we can see various domestic animals that were even existed as domesticated animals in the earlier ages as well as nowadays. The first farmers and herders mark a site where archaeologists have found the evidence of these people, and these people are found all over the subcontinent. The most important places of these farmers and herders are in the northwest, in Kashmir, and in the east and south India. These archaeologists studied the evidence of plants and animal bones. One of the most exciting finds were the burns of burnt grain. Scientists can identify these grains using various methods, and we know that that's how we know that a number of crops were grown in different parts of the country. These scientists can also identify the bones of different animals, and thus we can find out exactly which animal was present at which era of the time. Here we have a list where the grains and bones were present and the different sites in which they were present. Archaeologists have found traces of huts and houses at some sites. As we know that for raising these plants and properly taking care of these plants, storing the seeds, the humans had to settle. In Burzahom, people built pit houses, which were dug into the ground with steps leading into them. This means that even in the cold weather and harsh climates, they still had shelter. They also found cooking hearths both inside and outside the huts, which suggests, depending upon the weather, people could cook food either indoors or outdoors. Similarly, to hunt and cook, stone tools have found from many sites as well. According to the timing of the presence of these humans, they are divided into different times like Paleolithic and Neolithic. Earlier times were called the Paleolithic tools. The tools that are found in this era were different from the Paleolithic tools. That's why they are called the Neolithic tools. These tools were polished to have a sharp edge and mortars and pestles used for grinding grains and other plants. These mortars and pestles are still used for grinding grain today. Some tools of the Paleolithic type continues to be made and used. Some tools were also made of bone. As the archaeologists dig deeper, many kinds of earthen pots have also been found. These pots were sometimes decorated and were used for storing things like grains like rice, wheat, and lentils. Even today, these grains and lentils have become an important part of the human diet. These humans also started weaving cloth using different kinds of materials, like for example, cotton, which we now use. Here we can see a picture of a pit house where the steps leading into the ground, as well as the ancient earthen pots which are used for storage. We cannot directly know about the other customs and practices because archaeology does not tell us directly about these. Many different scholars and scientists have studied the lives of present-day farmers who practice simple agriculture, as in earlier days there were much of technological advancements. These scholars have also studied the lives of herders. Many of these farmers and herders live in groups called tribes. These tribes follow certain customs and practices which may exist earlier as well. What are tribes? These 2 to 3 generations of farmers and herders live together in small settlements or villages. Most families are related to one another, and groups of such families form a tribe. Members of one tribe follow similar occupations like hunting, gathering, farming, herding, and fishing. Even in those days, women did most of the agricultural work, including preparing the ground, sowing seeds, looking after the plants, and harvesting, while the children to help them to look after the plants, driving away pests, animals, and birds that might eat them. Women also thresh, husk, and grind grain. Men lead large herds of animals in search of fields. Children often look after the small flocks like sheep. The cleaning and animals of milking is also very important and is done by both men and women. Both of them make pots, basket tools, and huts, which are very important as seen earlier. They also take part in singing, dancing, and decorating their huts. Certain members of the community, often male, are regarded as leaders. They may be old and experienced, or young brave warriors, or maybe even priests. Old women are often known to have rich wisdom and experience and are respected. These tribes, therefore, have a very rich and unique cultural tradition, including their own language, music, stories, and paintings, as well as their own deities. So what exactly makes tribes different from these societies that we study about is that the wealth of nature is seen as the wealth of the entire tribe, and everyone shares and uses them together. There are no differences or societal opportunities between the rich and the poor. Now we have a case study of a site near the Bolan Pass, one of the most important routes into Iran. This place is called the Mehrgarh site. Mehrgarh was probably one of the places where men and women learned to grow barley and wheat and rear sheep and goats for the first time. It was one of the earliest villages that we know about, and we came to know about it through the archaeologist who found evidence of many different kinds of animal bones. These include wild animals such as the deer and the pig, and in later levels they found bones of sheep and goat. Further, they found cattle bones in a large quantity, suggesting that this was the animal generally kept by the people. Other finds include the square or rectangular houses which have 4 or more compartments used for storages, as seen in the picture. When people die, it is found that their relatives and friends generally pay respect for them. And one of the ways in which they do this is through burial, and several burial sites have been found at Mehrgarh. Another case study is of the Daojali Harding. It is a site in the hills near the Brahmaputra Valley, close to the routes leading to China and Myanmar. Several archaeologists have found stone tools like mortars and pestles used for grinding grain have been found here. This indicates that people were mostly probably farming and preparing food. Other finds include jadeite, a stone that might have been brought from China, as well as tools made of fossil wood and pottery. We can see some pictures of the remains found in Daojali Harding. Suppose the people first start living on flat land. Over the years, the surface will gradually rise. People discard waste, rocks and soils start degrading. They generally stay and rebuild houses in the same place. After hundreds and hundreds of years, this leads to a foundation of a mound. When this mound is dug up, what is found from the upper layers is generally formed from a later time than what is found from the lower layers, which are older. These different layers are often referred to as levels. What is one of the most distinctive features of a village? It is the people that are engaged in food production. Here we can see the different layers of sand and dirt. As the earlier times, we find flint tools, animal tusks, and human jawbones. Further, we can see animal bones, wooden bowls, and stone figures, necklaces, pots, copper fish hooks, which suggests that more evolution has happened. Humans have learned how to make items and so on. Further, we can see pottery, jewelry, armor, swords, etc., which suggests that as the levels increases, the human complexity also increases. Thank you.